Hey, 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 it's Rebecca Simon Peter with Leadership Mojo. Thank you so much for being here today. We are continuing the topic of the role of the church in gun violence. And it's a tough topic. We've been exploring it for several weeks. We have a couple more weeks to go. It's worthy of our consideration. Complex topic that has roiled the nation, the world, for so many years now. And so we're diving deep into discovering what are the sources? What are the solutions? And today I'm really grateful to be joined by a new colleague. And I'd like you to meet Joe Forscher. Joe is a licensed professional counselor and the chief of behavioral health of Northeast Kingdom Human Services in Vermont. And Joe, I'm really grateful that you're here today. I appreciate your being here. You know, gun violence has increasingly impacted once safe spaces, right? Homes and churches and synagogues and mosques and schools and medical clinics and stores and you know, right now there's two answers that people are putting forth to us. Hey, the answer is get better mental health facilities and care for people. And the answer is regulate guns. And you might recognize those as political answers. Those are sort of the two things that are happening. You know, thankfully, we do have a bipartisan solution right now that's moving us gently forward in that direction. But talk to us today, Joe. This is your special area. Talk to us about mental health. What role do you suppose mental health or the lack of mental health care actually plays in the ongoing gun violence that we experience in the U.S.?
Well, that's a big question, and I think I'll start with maybe a small answer. But first of all, Rebecca, thanks for having me here.
Glad you're here.
I think it's an important discussion. I don't necessarily disagree with getting better mental health resources and access, but you know, the role of mental health helps. Well, being mentally healthy helps us navigate life in a safe but also meaningful, enjoyable way. And I think what happens when we introduce a mental illness into our thought process is that our thoughts, this is not rocket science, folks, so I hope you're not disappointed, but our thoughts influence our behavior. And when we get into, it's been my experience anyway, when myself included and my clients, when we start to behave as if our thoughts are reality, we start responding to them as their reality, and they're often not. I can tell you 100 examples just today. You know, I'm in a meeting, somebody looked away at the wrong time, and I'm thinking, you know, they don't trust what I'm saying. So I think what we as humans, we're kind of wired to fill in the blanks, and that's a survival instinct. Back in the days of the saber-toothed tiger, when I was just a little boy, but we don't need that now, and so that's kind of where we get off into trouble. And then you introduce the landscape that, and as you were saying, safe spaces aren't safe anymore. And so how does that shape the way we navigate that?
And, you know, let's just be fair. Safe spaces have not always been safe, but I would say they are less reliably safe with the introduction of unpredictable gun violence. They're less reliably safe than they used to be, and they weren't perfect before.
And I think that less reliably safe is a nice way to make it more accurate. So when I was in school, and I think we talked about this the other day, it never occurred to me that there would be anything, gun violence or anything, unsafe. But maybe that was because I was naive too.
Well, let's hear it for naivete. But I think
it served its purpose.
We have lost the ability, I think, at this point to be naive. And, you know, we're especially speaking to church leaders here. And so I really appreciate, Joe, your coming in with the expertise that you have with behavioral health. I appreciate your coming in, and I know our church leaders do too, to really kind of unpack this question about mental health. When the focus is so much on we've got to get mental health systems and delivery systems and quality and accessibility fixed, then somehow gun violence is going to go away. Do you think that's true?
No, in a one-word answer, because um, mental health is not a predictor of future violence. The
Mental
only
health is not a predictor of future violence?
Yes, according to data, and actually I meant to tell you this. I can email you some links to a couple of articles. Um, but the only evidence-based predictor of future violence is a history of violence,
Okay.
and that really, if you dig down into the data more, um, even with folks with a diagnosed mental illness that fit this profile of, I hate to say it, but there is a profile now of mass shooters,
Yep.
Caucasian male, angry,
Mm-hmm.
even folks that fit that profile that have a mental illness, there's still no data to say that mental illness causes gun violence. And by the way, it's been my experience with research. Very seldom in the research game can we say this definitely causes this. So we always talk in terms of correlation, right?
Mm-hmm.
This event is correlated to this event, and we're careful with the language that we use, not to say it's causal, but
correlative, perhaps.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I understand though, because there's an intuitive common sense to it. And I'm probably going to not say this exactly right, but you'd have to be crazy to kill somebody, and my gosh, to
Right.
go to a school and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I get it.
So what is that, Joe? Well, I mean, I guess that is why people say it's mental illness. Help people be better adapted.
Yeah.
So what is that? You'd have to be crazy to go kill people. Are they mentally ill? Are they insane? Is it temporary insanity? Is it the society that's mentally ill?
Mm-hmm.
Is it our
Wow.
exposure to guns and violence all the time? Like, what's up?
I'm going to say yes to everything that you just said, except to the what's up part. It's not really a yes or no question. I don't necessarily, I don't think that having a discussion on, the subtleties or the nuances of language is particularly helpful. But I'll chance it by saying I don't know if it's mental illness or it's just we're not well. And that, for me, there's a difference. There's a subtle difference.
What is that difference, Joe? Tell us about that.
Yeah, you sounded like a therapist just then. That was good. Yeah, mental wellness is I'm actively taking care of myself, even though I'm having good days and bad days.
Okay.
And I have the ability to exert and shape my emotions. For me, mental illness is it can be a genetic component to it. It can have physiological piece to it, like in schizophrenia, for example, and even depression.
Yeah.
Certainly in bipolar, which is this whole I'm depressed or I'm manic. And there's less control, but still the ability to shape the impact of the illness.
Got it.
And I think what I've learned over the years, anyway, it's a continuum.
So you're hearing that there's mental illness, there's mental wellness.
Yes.
And in between, there may be not well, but it's not necessarily mental illness.
Right. Not to the point where, and this is interesting. I'm not a lawyer, but I think everybody's aware of the legal part of the legal definition. If I'm using a insanity plea, what was I able to tell right from wrong? That's kind of the basic yardstick.
Yeah.
And there are some people who are experiencing psychosis, which in very simple terms that even I can understand, is you're breaking with reality. Your reality isn't what I'm experiencing. So those folks really are functioning kind of in a different time zone than so that's different than mental wellness where I'm fluctuating.
Okay, got it. So, Joe, that begs a whole other question. We're living in a time of multiple realities. I mean, if you're to look at our political landscape right now, we have a January 6th inquiry going on, and we see that there are people operating completely different realities.
Isn't it amazing, isn't it? There's facts and then there's truth. And it used to be the same thing. But I guess it's not anymore.
Truthiness, like it sounds like it could be true. And if you say things over and over, then it becomes true, even if it's not factual. Yeah. So like maybe that gets back to the point that I was wondering about before. Maybe our society as a whole simply isn't well.
Agreed. And there's elements that are not helping either. I think of information, access to information. I don't know about most of your listeners and viewers. I'm old enough to remember going to the library and actually checking out books from the library that I had to walk to the library and
with cards in the back,
with a card, and get the card catalog and all that. Yep. And certainly in undergraduate and graduate school, research papers were very different. But I trusted the information in the book because they were vetted, they were peer reviewed. And so in a way, this access to the internet and social media kind of gives the recipients, which is all of us, the ability to kind of choose our own reality, choose our own facts, and then choose our own truth.
Yeah. And because it's all sort of equally presented, mediated by a screen and various formatting techniques, it all feels like it has sort of the same weight to it in a lot of ways. Or
it does.
The same weight. Yeah. So, Joe, as a mental health care provider, and somebody who oversees behavioral health in Northeast Kingdom, Human Services in Vermont, what can churches do to partner with you to create more wellness? Let's just talk about that. Let's talk about how can a society grow in wellness. What can church leaders do with organizations like yours?
I think there's a lot of opportunities for partnerships. I can tell you, just with our agency, by the way, we've got clergymen on our board of directors. And always, it starts us off with, I'm going to show my ignorance here. Is it invocation that you start things off? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. We'll edit that to make it look smooth. But starts us off with that. And I got to tell you, in my earlier days, I would have been uncomfortable with that. But there's such a large natural overlap between the spirituality piece, the church, and I don't want to offend anybody. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality and just being a good human being, and because I think that's at the root of what you do, and that's your business.
Tapping into the goodness of God and being an expression of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the partnership opportunities really are underutilized, and I would be in favor, and I think I might seek this out actually after talking with you. I'd be fine going to local churches and having a conversation and doing question and answer, a panel discussion. And I would love it to bring that to our folks too.
So churches and mental health organizations partnering together in a community to learn more about each other's realm or ways that they could be partners with each other.
Understanding the realm and looking for common ground, which I think is abundant. And then I think you talked about it a few minutes ago when we were talking about social media and the internet. how to package it, market it in a good way, not to spin it, not to try to trick people, but the genuine appeal here is we're how can you be against being a good human being? How can you come out against that? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
built in, and it's I would love to talk to folks in the church too, and just in the community. I need to understand because my viewpoint is if I'm not careful, I automatically assume, and this is, you talked about this the other day about there's a dichotomy. It's not a discussion. It's a dichotomy now with the political landscape. I can't fathom how anybody could, what I perceive as defending school shootings by supporting stuff. So I don't, again, I'm not here to talk about the political piece, but I often say to myself, I feel passionate about my view. They feel just as passionate. I need to understand that.
Yeah, so that's kind of a good segue to something I've been thinking about and really recently published in a blog that just went out today about the role of the church in solutions to gun violence. And that's, I think there needs to be a couple of reframes that go on. One, that there isn't just one solution, their solution or our solution, politically, whether it's greater access to mental health care or more gun regulation. Those are sort of the either ors, even though, thank goodness, we've got some new bipartisan legislation. But I think we need to reframe that because there are so many. As I said, the American Psychological Association says reducing the incidence of gun violence will require interventions through multiple systems, including legal, public health, public safety, community, and health. But I think in order for those solutions to even be activated, that the church in particular, and I want to talk about that, and it could be too that the mental health care providers, but I want to say the church needs to exercise its authority in a positive way. Now, because churches best operate not in the realm of politics, but in the realm of ethics. We're about morals, not power. And I think probably healthcare providers might find themselves in a similar realm there. But the issue of gun violence has been so firmly stuck in the political process, with, this side claiming this and this side claiming that, all of it bolstered by significant lobbying, that we really aren't even down to the moral issues involved with, where
they somehow get shortchanged or pushed. That should be the headline, and somehow it gets
the moral issues. Yeah. So what I want to see churches do is reframe the conversation from one of politics into one of ethics, because that's where the church can have a voice of being a part of the national conscience, of helping people think through things. In the United Methodist tradition, in which I've been trained, we have a process by which we use scripture, experience, tradition, and reason, logical thought processes, by which we arrive at theological positions. And I like that because it's very comprehensive. And I think that if we're able to bring our faith-based resources to bear, along with our rational thought processes, we really can look at things from an ethical perspective. If we can take it out of the heat of politics, bring it into that calmer, quieter, more nuanced space of ethics. If cooler heads could prevail, we could at least talk about it, and we could at least hear each other.
Because setting up that conversation is very difficult if we're all in this mindset of when I get, and we're wired this way again as human beings, if I'm perceiving a danger, even if it's a difference of opinion, but you put that into the landscape of gun violence, if I'm not careful, I'm going to trigger my fight or flight response.
Yes.
And once I'm in that, we're wired because our brains actually work differently. When I'm in, my sympathetic nervous system prepares my brain to think differently. So I'm not thinking long term. I'm thinking I need to deal with what's right in front of me, and I'm not at my best.
Yeah. It's more about how do I poke your eyes out before you poke my eyes out.
And how productive is that? And
even
in the heat of the moment, I always regret not being rational and sane and ethical and moral, by the way. I don't like not being that way.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when we're in that, I mean, I think we could look at the political process in many ways and say it's not well. It's not well,
I
right?
would
So we've
go,
got to,
maybe it's not even, it's more than that. Maybe the whole, the structure isn't conducive anymore to
structure,
rational discourse.
yeah, the structure itself, yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, Joe, you've given us a lot to think about, as you talk about symptoms impacting thoughts and thoughts
Mhm.
impacting behaviors. And then, is what I'm thinking even real? And then the behaviors are
Mhm.
consistent with the thoughts. What, what could you leave us with in terms of what sorts of thoughts and behaviors would you want to see society
Mhm.
demonstrating when it comes to addressing the matter of gun violence?
Yeah.
What kinds of thoughts could we dwell on? What sorts of behaviors would be helpful?
Let's see if I can connect this here. When you were talking about that, the word mindfulness came to my mind because I know that if, when I'm at my best, and there's a phrase we use in the business, it's called wise mind. It's, if
Mm,
you look at a Venn diagram, it's your emotional mind and your rational mind, and that's where
okay,
they
yeah,
overlap. Yeah.
yeah.
And so when I'm really in wise mind, I'm I feel uh, like I'm much more, I'm more articulate, and I just feel like I'm a better person. And
Mhm.
I wonder if we can all commit in some slight way to practice mindfulness. It's almost like um, exercising. And here's the wellness piece. How do you get physically well?
Mm.
And I can tell you how not to, by eating pizza every night and watching TV and then going to sleep. Um, but and I don't feel good like that. It feels good in the moment. I have to be honest with you,
It does in
but
the moment, yes.
yes. But long term, I'm not very happy with myself, and I have to exercise intentionally. So if we can be more intentional, and for me, intentional is a close cousin to mindfulness.
Mm.
And I saw. I should have. I can send you the link for this. There's a really nice video that the Cleveland Clinic has.
Mm,
It's
mhm,
it's called the empathy video, and I don't want to
mm.
spoil it for you guys, but I think looking at that would be very helpful. It's all about if you could walk in somebody else's shoes, and
Very nice.
my God, if it's just when I do that, and I don't do it all the time, but when I am able to do that, it's just I navigate the world so much more
Yeah,
effectively in my role as in behavioral health, but just as a human being too.
yeah,
And it just takes a second. It takes a second for me to go off, and it takes a second for me not to.
yeah.
So I would
Beautiful,
leave. Let's try to be more mindful, and maybe that's something um, we can learn more about.
beautiful. So mindfulness, empathy, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. We've talked about a
Mhm.
lot today, Joe, and I really appreciate your being
Yeah,
here.
I'm going to
Uh,
throw one more phrase. I'm going to copyright it. Um, I think I told it before. It's emotional feng shui, and
oh
so
yeah,
feng shui is the art of um, manipulating the environment because it shapes and impacts us. And I used to think that wasn't very realistic, but think about it: if your office or your house is
mhm,
cluttered, and
yep,
it does influence.
it
So
does.
let's be more intentional even with that too. Create the conditions for success is what I like to say.
There we go. Very good. So here's my hope and my prayer is that churches, synagogues, mosques, houses of worship of every sort will really seek out partnership with the mental health
Very
care
good.
providers in their community, and that mental health care providers will also seek out um, uh, those spiritual stakeholders in the community. And that together
Mhm.
we can really begin to weave some guardrails for people to create more wellness, more mindfulness, more sense of purpose, and more
Yeah.
sense of belonging. Yeah.
I would say that I'm getting goosebumps, by the way, but because I'm going to take this to work tomorrow, but a shared sense of purpose.
A shared sense of purpose. Yeah,
Yeah.
very nice. Yeah, I just recently wrote a book out. It's called Forging a New Path, Moving the
Mm.
Church Forward in a Post-Pandemic World. And one of the things I discovered as I was writing that book is how much the sense of belonging is missing for people. And
Yep.
it's been missing for a while. It was exacerbated during the
Mhm.
pandemic, but
Right.
that sense of belonging. And so we really need to belong to each other. And
Mm.
I know that creates wellness. I've heard it said that there's no we in illness, but there is we and wellness.
Nicely done.
Yeah, I like
Yes,
that. So
that is a
thank
good
you so
one.
much, Joe. I really appreciate your being with me. And I invite all our listeners and watchers to tune in next week for the next Leadership Mojo. We're going to be talking about a really interesting topic, which is how do you disarm the culture of hate and violence that has permeated society and even impacted the church? If we're going to move things into the realm of ethics, if we're going to talk about things, if we're going to respect each other, if we're going to have mutual shared purpose with each other, we have to somehow disarm, reshape the culture of contempt that we're living in so that we can create something more life-giving, like good soil, something more life-giving. So please join me next week and do watch the blogs for more of the role of the church in gun violence. And if you have found this to be helpful conversation, please do like and share this. Pass it on to your colleague, pass it on to your friend that's also wondering what can they do about gun violence. Thank you so much for joining me. And again, Rebecca Simon Peter with Joe Forscher. This has been Leadership Mojo. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.